Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Catholic Re.Con Testimonies from Reverts and Converts. I'm your host, Eddie Trask. Before we get into this week's video, please remember to subscribe and share these videos with Cradle Catholics, with potential converts, with people that you know that would care. I would greatly appreciate it, and make sure you comment and like as well. This week's guest is Adam Jackson. Adam, welcome
Swain.
to the program.
Sorry.
What was that?
Thank you. Swain. It's Jackson Swain. Sorry
Jackson
about that.
Swain. Okay. I appreciate the correction there. Yeah. Well, welcome, my brother. Thanks for agreeing to be on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I was looking forward to it.
Awesome. So, Adam, I think it was my wife. She was online, and I don't even know where this was, on Facebook or somewhere, and she saw a portion of Adam's story, and she said, "You need to talk to this gentleman." So here we are. So Adam, I know it's adventure filled and there's a lot of twists and turns. Why don't you start us where you think it all began?
So I would have to go all the way to the beginning, because that's where it kind of all ties in. So I was born, this is like a life story thing. I was born in Mississippi, and very shortly after I was born, my mom left my biological father and moved us to New Orleans, Louisiana, where she met my brother's father, who I was under the impression for a very long time was my dad. And he was a Muslim. He was not a Christian man, and he was raising us to be Muslim. He was Persian. And when I was around 8, maybe a little sooner, I discovered that this man actually wasn't my dad. The appearance kind of told on us. So, I mean, here I am, and then here's my brother and my dad, and we look nothing alike. We're not even the same race. Something's wrong. And so my parents eventually split, and the only thing I had ever heard about Jesus was that he's not God's son, and God doesn't have a son. You know, that's not an Islamic belief. And so when they split, because of how New Orleans was, my mom enrolled us into a private school. This was the early 90s. At the time, New Orleans was murder capital. And so she didn't want us anywhere near public schools. And very thankfully, she enrolled us in Shiloh Christian Academy. And that was when I heard the gospel. And immediately I believed everything that principal said, because also on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they had chapel for the students. So it was like a church service during the week. And like immediately I was like, oh man, I like what this guy's saying. And so like Muhammad after that was just, okay, I don't know who this Muhammad guy is, but I want this Jesus he's talking about. And so fast forward, we ended up leaving Virginia, or leaving New Orleans, ended up in Virginia because my mom met someone else, remarried. He adopted me, and he moved us to Virginia. And then we moved to Florida. And when I was around 16, their marriage started kind of falling apart, and they met a man that was a part of a holiness organization. And I don't know how familiar you are with that, but it's like if you walked into a Pentecostal church in the 50s, this is what I ended up becoming a part of from the time I was 16 till about 28. In fact, I was actually 3 years, almost 4 years in the seminary there.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, because I had a great desire to be a pastor. But in my third year, I had convinced myself that God wasn't calling me to be in the ministry. And then, in fact, you know, looking at the Bible, I could no longer, with a clear conscience, believe the outward form of holiness, the standard that we were being taught. Because I mean, on the surface, I could see it, but once you understand the context and everything else, it's kind of like, no, it's not. I can't condemn someone to hell for these things. That's not what we're supposed to be doing anyway. And so I ended up leaving, and like when I left, I'm not going to say this group was a cult, but the leadership was very cult-like. And so when someone leaves, they're treated like an outcast a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, they make you like, I was terrified of God for a while because I thought that in leaving them, I had left God. And so for a while, I was absolutely terrified of God. And eventually I got over that. And so like maybe 7, 8 years had passed. And I ended up meeting my wife in Savannah. You can see I jump around a lot. Savannah, Georgia. And she's in the Army. I was a construction worker. And so we got married and then immediately tried to start having kids. And this is kind of where it comes in. We could not, there was an issue, like we weren't conceiving. And so she went to go see a doctor. And as far as, not with too much detail, but there was something going on with her that was preventing conception, but it was a simple fix.
Sure.
And so we waited about a year because we were going to get ready to PCS to Pennsylvania, which is where I'm at now. And we went back to the doctor once we got here, and that issue wasn't an issue. They couldn't find it at all. So we were like, oh, well, that's great. But then the attention got put on me. And some tests were done, and turns out it was me. And the doctor was like, it's not impossible, but it's highly unlikely that it's going to happen naturally. And it was devastating. I felt like I had robbed my wife of motherhood. I felt like my dream of being a father is not going to be fulfilled. And it was horrible. And so I'd come down here in this very room that I am now, and I would literally pray, God, I want a kid, and, please, please, please. And, and then one day I kind of just got fed up, and I thought about Hannah, how she prayed for Samuel, I think it was. And I dropped my hands, and it's not uncommon for me to talk to God like this. And I'm like, man, come on, God, you got all these people out here that are having kids that don't want them, that can't take care of them and don't deserve them. I just want one. And if you give me one, I'll give it back. Not even really knowing what that meant. Like a day or two later, she took 6 pregnancy tests and they were all positive. I was blown away. And so obviously my mind goes back to that prayer, but eventually you get wrapped up in the excitement and you kind of forget about that. 4 months after my son was born, who was also born on my birthday, she was pregnant with my daughter.
Wow.
And so at this point, it's like, I feel like God's kind of like, hey, you promised, now you got 2. And so I was like, yeah, I gotta hold my word up. Like, God's given me 2 kids. It happened naturally. Like, this is unbelievable. I'm like finally living the life that I've always wanted to live. And so as I started to kind of think, okay, I need to do something. Let me find a church. And I'm looking at the church at large, and I'm just, man, this thing is a disaster. I don't believe what I used to believe, so I can't go back to that because, for one, my wife's not going to go back to that with me. There's no way. 2, also because of what they believe, I couldn't really even be in good standing with them because I'm a stay-at-home dad. So they believe that it's the woman that stays home and the men go to work, and it's a fair belief, but my wife's in the Army, so
sure.
So I'm just like looking at all this, and just like, there's so many, just hundreds of denominations, and they're all convinced, and they're all just emphatically, this is right, this is right. And they're very sincere, but there's only one truth. So something's wrong here. And believe it or not, I actually started looking into Islam again, kind of thinking back to my brother's dad and everything
Sure.
else. I ended up reading the Quran from cover to cover twice.
Wow.
Looking at reading, even went to a mosque and talked to they call him like a sheikh or something like that, a sheikh. And very, very sweet guy. Talked to me a lot, and I came really, really, really close to converting. But in this whole process, there's a lot of claims they make where they speak about Jesus or Muhammad being in the Bible, and they'll use like verses of scripture where Jesus is talking about, when the Spirit of truth comes, they'll be like, the Spirit of truth is Muhammad. I'm like, no, that's not the case. That he's not talking about Muhammad. I'm sorry, you can't twist it as much. You can twist it all you want. Muhammad is not in the Bible, except for maybe a false prophet, but that's about as close as you're gonna get. And but I was still like, because it, Islam is, on the surface, it's very appealing. It seems like it's a wonderful way to live. I'm not talking about Middle Eastern Islam, but like how they live here in America. And very honest people, very upright. It's like, man, I like what it does. And the Quran, it's got like a certain flow to it that I like. But I couldn't really embrace what they believed about Jesus. And one of the things I was praying about all this, trying to find the truth, I prayed two things. God, I don't care what the truth is, whatever it is, if it's true, I'm willing to accept it. But please do not let me be deceived. Like that was like the top of everything, because like, we're thinking about eternity, and I'm going to be leading my family into this. Like I can't afford for them to follow me blindly into hell, and so that was like my prayer. And one of the things that a lot of Muslim scholars, Islamic scholars, claim is that the Bible was corrupted. And I didn't think there was much truth to that, but I wanted to check it out. And so as I'm searching out to find out if there's any merit to their claim, I went deeper in history than I had ever been as far as church history. And I ran into people like Scott Hahn, Tim Staples, just to name a couple, and Mike Schmitz. And they made a lot of sense about some of the things that I used to grapple with as far as Catholicism. And anyway, one of the things that we are taught in my group, we were taught that almost immediately after the apostles, the church just went corrupt, and it was just a mess for 1500 years until Luther and those guys came around. And so God used those guys to, restore the truth and all this other stuff. And I just took it at face value. But the further back I went into history, reading about some of the things, and I'm looking for proof that the Bible is corrupted, and I'm not finding any. I'm finding, that first of all, the Catholic Church canonized the scriptures, which I knew that, and I actually always had a problem with that as a Protestant, because I was like, so we'll believe that they got the Bible right, but we're not going to believe that they're even Christian. Like, that's not fair. And so
that's not fair. Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. And then I ran into like some issues with the Deuterocanonical books. I hope I said that right.
You did.
And I read a couple for myself, and I was like, I don't see why these would have been removed. But then I saw things that sounded quite Catholic in those books, and I was like, okay, now I know why they were removed. They sounded too Catholic. So, and this is all like happening real fast. And so then I'm looking at, well, what kind of guy was Martin Luther anyway? And so I'm starting to like go off of my whole idea of maybe converting to Islam, and I'm searching out Catholicism and all this other stuff.
When was this, by the way? Just so the listeners know.
This was like 7 months ago.
Oh shoot.
Yeah. This was
that's incredible. I love it. Yeah.
And so so I'm reading about Luther, and I knew that there was times where he said things that were pretty anti-Semitic, and I'm just like, well, he was still a man of God. But then like I read about some of the other stuff he said and the things that he did, and I don't want to smear him too bad, but I'm like, he doesn't seem like the caliber of character of somebody that God would move on to restore his church. He seems really more like he's just disgruntled and angry. And so, and John Calvin, even as a Protestant, I never took that guy serious. Like, as far as predestination and things like that, God doesn't create people to send them to hell. That's not the God I know. And so I'm thinking about Martin Luther, like, man, so I don't think these guys had the truth. And so now I'm kind of in a predicament. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so I had ordered a little bit before that, before I'm doing all this, just online, I had ordered, what's it called? Rome Sweet Home.
Scott Hahn. Yeah.
Yes. And I didn't take much of it. I started reading it, and you don't get very far without getting emotional reading his story.
Yep.
And I'll probably never meet that guy, but I love that guy. Like, I've read a few of his books now. I've watched a bunch of his stuff on the internet. Like, I love that guy. And as I'm continuing to read him and things like that, and then one day I was on YouTube looking at Father Smith's, and someone had brought up, like, which is a common issue with Protestants. Someone brought up the issue with, like, icons and statues and things like that.
Yep.
And so I'm actually in the car waiting for my wife, just watching this on my phone. And he's like, have you ever read about Solomon's Temple? And when he said that, in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, it's full of, like, things that if a Protestant were to walk into, they'd be like, we're in a house full of idolatry. And I literally dropped my phone, just like, he's so right. Why are we getting so mad? And then I also, in thinking about that, people, when they started tearing the Confederate statues and stuff down, I noticed how mad people got. And I was thinking, these same people would, condemn Catholics of being idolatrous. And this is all my thoughts before I ever converted. This is just my reasoning. And so I'm skimming through a lot of the church fathers, and it's getting earlier and earlier and earlier to the very beginning. And none of it sounds like the Christianity that I understood at all. It's just simply not there. And I didn't have a problem becoming Catholic. I was looking for the truth. And so it wasn't like it was grieving my heart to not see my understanding of the church anywhere. It was actually like finally something I could hold on to, if this is true. But I was still like kind of debating with it. And when I got to the Eucharist, even though I was in seminary, I never knew that there was any group that actually believed that Jesus was literally present in the Eucharist. And when I understood that that's the Catholic teaching and the Orthodox teaching, all of Paul's wordings in Corinthians and John chapter 6, it all made perfect sense then, because that's some strong words to use if it's literally just a symbol. And that was when it was like, all right, I think I might really be onto something here. And then it was actually like things in the Bible that a lot of Protestant denominations kind of gloss over and don't give you a good answer for, that really kind of sealed the deal for me. Like, for instance, confession. I think it's John chapter 20.
23. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, that's, every time I read that, I always was like, what is he talking about?
Retain, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you retain? Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I'm thinking, who's he talking to? He's telling them to receive the Holy Spirit. He's not talking to the Holy Spirit. He's talking to the apostles.
Yeah.
And he literally says, like you were just saying, whose sins you retain, they are retained. Whose you forgive, they are forgiven. And then I went a little bit further up, thinking about something. And Jesus said, as the Father sent me, so send I you. And so, the Father sent Christ to forgive sins, to do all these things, and they were to continue the work of Christ. Right? So now I'm thinking about this, and then the communion of saints and Mary was, like, I think the last wall to fall. And it was Father Mike Schmitz. And I don't know how many times I've read Revelation prior, But when he spoke about, I think it's in Revelation 5, and then it's again in Revelation 8, where it talks about the elders having incense, which are the prayers of the saints.
Yeah.
And my first, when I read that, it's like, how did I never see this before? I read Revelation, I don't know how many times. You know, I went through seminary and aced the class that taught Revelation 1 and 2. How did I never see that or take note of it? Why are the elders offering our prayers to God if they're not the ones receiving them? That's the question I asked myself. And then also in Tobit, I think it is, where the angel said, when you prayed, I offered your prayer to God. Does that sound familiar?
That does sound familiar. I don't know if it's yeah, either way, it's Deuterocanon. We'll say
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like, with all these things in my head, I remember one day it was just like, just the blinders came off, and it was just like, they're right. They're right. And I stopped. I dropped everything. I literally stopped at that moment, and I got online and I called every parish to find out, what do I need to do. I called one lady. I was like, hey, I want to come to mass. How do I do that? Because I'm thinking there's going to be a dress code. I've never set foot in a Catholic church.
Yeah,
And
I love it.
she was like, you just show up. And I was like, all right, cool, I'll be there. And so, and then I'm like, well, how do you become Catholic? And so then I'm finding out about RCIA. And so I'm leaving message after message, and I'm emailing. It's a bunch of different parishes, because I'm just going to go to whoever calls me back first. And about 2 weeks pass by, and I'm going to mass at random parishes, just like whenever there's a mass. And a man named Deacon Bob called me back, and he said, next time you come to mass, introduce yourself so I know who you are. And so he's an older gentleman, and I love him to death. And so after mass, I approach him, and I could tell I'm making him a little uneasy, because I'm covered in tattoos, and he's like, well, look, you're a little late, but you keep believing in your heart, and by the time RCIA rolls back around, we can get you in. We can possibly get you in. And totally threw water on my fire. I was like, okay, all right. So, but I kept going to mass, and he gave me his phone number. So I'm texting him, asking him questions and things like that. And I'm praying the whole time, like, God, I have to be Catholic. Like, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to raise my children.
So
and,
now this is 2020. This
yeah.
is
Yeah.
Go ahead. That's crazy. Wow.
And 2022.
Yeah, exactly. 2022. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the whole time I'm communicating with him, and I'm coming to mass, and then just one day I remember, I've never been the type to give much credit, or not much credit, but much attention to those who say that God talks to them. But I remember after mass, and just really wanting to be Catholic, really wanting to experience the Eucharist. I've already been praying the rosary. And matter of fact, the day I started praying the rosary, it dawned on me later, was also the anniversary of my natural mother's death. So the day I accept Mary as my spiritual mother happened to be the anniversary of my physical mother's death. I bawled like a little girl.
Yep.
And so anyway, I'm sitting in the pew. It's the end of mass, and not an audible voice, of course, but like in my heart, I felt like, God said, are you sure you want this? And I'm just like, yes, Lord. And that day he was like, I was talking to Father Rich, we're going to try to get you in this Easter. And I'm like, whoa, okay, great. And so there's all these hurdles we got to jump, because they got to make sure that my marriage is valid, and all this other stuff. And it's just going like a million miles an hour. And I'm wondering if they're gonna, have enough time to even get this done. And but they did. And that Easter, I was brought into the church. And last Sunday, I had both my children baptized. I will raise them Catholic. Yeah.
Beautiful story. So just a few months ago, you received into the church. you just described an intense whirlwind there. What was that moment like? What was that vigil mass like? I'm assuming it was at vigil mass. I know that there are.
It was. It
Yeah.
was. It was super. It was really emotional because it was like literally agonizing before God just weeks prior to this, like wanting the truth so bad, but not knowing where it is and praying, God, just don't let me be deceived. I don't care what the truth is. I'll take it. Just don't let me be deceived for my sake and for my family's sake. I don't believe that there's 5,000 roadmaps and you just hope that we guess the right one. I know you'll get me to the right spot. And it was emotional because it was like, I think about how it was, and I can't help but think about when Jesus said, you know, learn of me, for I am meek and lowly, and you shall find rest unto your soul. It was like finally my mind and my heart was quiet.
Wow.
And it was like when they say, you know, welcome home on all the posts, when someone says I'm into the church, like that's yeah, that's like what it is. That's exactly how it felt.
You know, it's crazy when you said, I don't care, you know, like, I don't care what the truth is. That's so much in that statement where I hear total humility when you make a statement like that. You know, I don't care what the truth is. You're not saying I don't care on the,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, get the truth away from me. It is, I don't care what it looks like.
Right.
My heart is open because there's a lot of confusion out
Right.
there. There's a lot of energy that is put towards setting up false, you know, understandings of
Right.
not just the Catholic Church, of course, but other churches. And it's a sea of choices. And a lot of
Right.
the people that I talk to describe similar viewpoints where you're like, what do I do?
Yeah.
I understand post Luther, I know where all these denominations basically came from.
Right.
So if his theology is conjured, or if, you know, you can just grab whatever verses you want and create a theology, you
Right.
can see the result of that.
Right.
And then you're in this, yeah, no man's land. Like, where do I go? You know?
Right.
I wanted to ask you, when you said you were at one point considering converting to Islam, being raised, see, I don't know enough about it. So being raised that way, what would have been required? Do you even know what would have been required in that moment, given the fact that you were raised?
Right. So it's a kind of a lot like the sinner's prayer in a sense. It's
Okay.
called the Shahada, and it's basically where you confess that there is one God, that Muhammad is his prophet, and that's pretty much it. And you say it in English, and then you say it in Arabic, and it was halfway out of my mouth, like more than once.
Wow.
Like that's how close I came, because with all the confusion in the church world at large, it's the only thing that made sense. Because you got, you know, there's really like 2 or 3 branches of Islam, which is way better than 50,000 branches of Christianity,
Sure.
so to say. And so, but yeah, it would have been really just a profession of faith, and it's not like a ceremony really. Now, I'd have to then go to a mosque and say that in front of them. But you can convert wherever you are just by believing that there is indeed one God, which there is,
Yeah.
and that Muhammad is his prophet.
Got it. So that's like it's like a mini creed in a sense.
Yeah, it's a lot like that. That's in
Yeah.
when I found out how to convert, that's what I thought, like, yeah, this is kind of just like a creed, and very much like the, Jesus coming to my heart prayer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Almost like inviting Muhammad into your heart.
Yeah. Everyone's, I guess, asked to state what they believe is the truth. And that's what's so fascinating. And I'm sure you found this too. When you go back through history and you find the early church with the creeds
Right.
that are still said in mass
Right.
every day. Really,
Right.
it's just, it's mind-boggling when you get to that point and you realize why certain parts of the creed were developed
Right.
to combat heresy.
Right.
This is what I say, the very heresies that any modern Protestant would be thankful that
Right.
the church kind of set straight and
Right.
made sense of, like, okay, no, that's not the incarnation. No, that's not how the Trinity works. We're going
Right.
to define it, and we're going to make sure that it's
Right.
part of what we profess, because that is truth,
Right.
that kind of thing. So,
Right.
yeah.
The big thing, it's not really a big thing, but there's a lot of I came from an organization, so we had like a structure. We had a man who was the pastor's pastor, and as a student minister, he was my pastor as well. And then you had, it was laid out a lot like the Catholic Church, in the sense of, like, I guess my pastor would have been my pope.
Yep. Hierarchy. Yep.
Right. And so they always, would speak about, not wanting to submit to authority. That's why there's all these independent churches and all this stuff, and people don't like authority. And when they leave, because even when I was there, we had one break where they started a whole nother church. And then when the man that founded that organization passed away, another man got bitter because I guess he didn't feel like he had a big enough slice of the pie, and he left and started his own church. And it was like, even looking back at that, I'm just like, no, I don't think I definitely can't go back to that. But you're right, as far as like the way that the Catholic Church is set up with going back and defending all these things. And one of the crazy things is when you go back and you look at some of the heresies that they fought,
Yeah.
they're a lot like a lot of Protestant doctrine today, some of those heresies.
Gnosticism, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Like when I read that, I was like, whoo, this is scary. Is this even real?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just keeps coming back. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And
sure.
well, even the oneness Pentecostal
Right.
movement and other movements. Shoot, there was another one. I can't come up with it, but it was really frightening that I heard, and it was related to an early heresy. I forget what it was, but dang, what was I going to ask you related to that? I can't think of it. Oh well. Anything else that stood out to you? Anything else that I mean, you're still so fresh into this. What can you say to people that are considering conversion? Or there are a lot of people, believe it or not, that are just in the early stages where they say, this is not the church for me. And there's a toddler running in. They realize in the Protestant churches, this is not for me, this one church. And they start that journey where they're like, what's the next church for me? Kind of what you were describing. But a lot of people have to experience many, many denominations before they have that moment like you did. Is there anything you can say to that person?
There's always going to be something that you're not going to like or agree with, always. And once you get tired of that, you're going to move on to the next one. And it's tiresome. There's a lady that I was speaking with, and she's older, and she's had enough of going from church to church. And so she started looking into the Catholic Church. And you're going to burn out spiritually doing that. And so if you're looking at the Catholic Church, it might be a hard pill to swallow, but swallow it. Like, what are you waiting for? People may not like it, but if you can defend your faith, even if you can't, if you know that you know that you know, then that's really, it's all there. Everything the Catholic Church teaches is right there in the Bible. It's just been glossed over and twisted to mean something else. And just come home.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Yeah, I think I had that moment, and I've interviewed people that have had those moments where they would go back to the Bible and they would see what appeared to be Catholic, and yet they would say that can't be. Their heart wasn't there, and their brain
Right.
was like, just move on. That can't mean that.
Right.
It just can't, you know. And
Right.
so that's where that statement that you made about truth, the humility that it takes.
Right.
I don't want to say it only comes down to that, but that is a big portion of it. Our pride gets in the way and says,
Big time.
I don't understand that, and I've been taught certain things against that, so it's just not. It can't be true. That
Right.
kind of,
I forget who said it, but when I like, as soon as I came into the church, not as soon, but it wasn't long, you know, even any Protestant that comes into the Catholic Church, there's going to be times where they grapple with doubt. And I forget who said it. I don't know if it was another convert, but somebody said something to the effect of, I believe to understand. I don't try to understand so that I can therefore believe, because I know if I do not believe, I will never understand, or something along those lines. It was something like that.
you're talking about someone that you saw, because that sounds similar to Augustine. Augustine said something.
It might have been. He
and
was.
then someone was quoting it, but yeah, either way, that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's really been wonderful. And the fact that it's all right there in the Bible, like I'm really, a lot of times I'll pray for people that, because I have a lot of friends that are still back in my organization that have kept contact with me, and I know how sincere they are for God. And it's just like, you know, God, if you could just open their eyes, it wouldn't be hard, because it really truly is. It's all right there. I hear people that, as a Protestant, I would say when we're trying to talk to somebody about our faith, they're not going to accept history and tradition and things like that. They're going to accept the Bible. And I believe emphatically that we absolutely can defend the faith with the Bible alone. Not that we believe Bible alone.
Yeah, but
everything
defend it from yep.
Yeah, it's all there. Purgatory's in there, believe it or not. Luke chapter 11. I think it's chapter 11, where he's talking about the different, the one that didn't prepare himself. And
oh, sure. Yeah.
I think it's Corinthians chapter 3, if I'm not
mistaken. I'll let you go with that one. I don't remember some of the verses about purgatory.
But it's all there. Just in the 66 books, it's all there. Wait till you see the rest of the books.
That's an excellent point. Excellent point. Yeah, that you can defend. And I've seen a number of debates, Catholic Protestant debates, where the Catholic will refuse to appeal to tradition. Like, let's just go Bible alone.
Right.
And then if that is convincing to certain people, they can then see the importance of tradition and magisterial teaching,
right,
and how Scripture alone, like, you know, you've heard of the three-legged stool of Scripture, tradition, and magisterium, right?
Right.
Well, operating with Scripture alone, that can't even form a leg, and neither can tradition on its own. None of these things can be in isolation. They all have to be together, working together, checks and balances together, not just that must be literal or that must be a metaphor just because it feels that way. I'm
right,
convicted of that. It is my conscience that tells me so. That needs to be checked against
right,
history, specifically history that ties to Christ, not history that ties to, like you were saying, you know, 1600 years later or something. This has to be reiterated. You know, with the early church, you start to see the proximity of theology the proximity to Christ.
Right.
When I was a non-denominational Protestant, when I began going upstream, my theology kind of stopped in proximity to Luther.
Right.
And that's where I said I felt there was a wall there, because I couldn't see past the wall. And my mind, it made no sense, of course, like, oh, okay, I just accept I'm on this side of the wall. I need to pick a denomination. I was thinking we'd be Baptist or Calvinist or whatever. I was so confused because of that proximity to Luther. From that moment, where many would say there was freedom and, convictions, personal conscience, reason, just everything exploding. Yeah. And then you could see the absolute disaster, not necessarily in the moment, but certainly in hindsight. That's how you and I and many others start to see all these splits, and it just doesn't make any sense. And all it does is lead to more confusion and like, where do I go? To whom shall I go?
Right. And what's
like,
it going to look like in 50 years when my kids are in this?
Correct. Yeah. If people are breaking and you're there for a few years and you're watching church splits. Meanwhile, like you said earlier, we're not fans of authority. We're not fans of the papacy. Who's going to hold together those churches?
Right.
If an ego says I'm offended and I'm going to go elsewhere and start my own church,
right,
you've just become your own authority.
Right.
Right? I don't know
absolutely.
how you can escape viewing it that way, but anyway, I shouldn't say it like that. I couldn't see it, but then once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. So yeah.
I kind of when I was still considering if I was going to convert or not, before the lights came on and I knew I had to.
Yeah.
I would think about all the things that I didn't like about the Catholic Church, as far as like things that have been done in the past, even in my lifetime, with certain scandals and whatnot. And I came to the conclusion that if the Protestant world was unified, that scandal would be a whole lot worse than what goes on. Not that any scandal is good.
Yeah.
But everybody there's been, in every group, there's been something amiss.
Yeah.
And then I thought about, it really doesn't matter who is filling what office. At the end of the day, I got to stand before God, not before so-and-so. I got to give an answer for me and my kids and my wife. And that's all that matters. And I don't have to like what someone might do or get caught up in, but that's between them and God.
That's true. Absolutely. Yeah, no, well said. I think it's funny that we had to transition from your laptop to your phone, because now you're in the light. So it was a nice transition of your journey. You are in the light now, and it's been a pleasure. I have to say, like everyone else did online, welcome home. God bless you. God bless your family. Thank you for being courageous enough to share your story, talk about all these moments, and the fact that it's so fresh. I know that these types of stories, I would never say that they grow stale, but there's something about someone that is just brand new, on fire, helping cradles and old converts and reverts kind of get that back in their spirit. So very inspiring. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Right on. Everyone, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. And until next time, take care and God bless.